is Josh Johnson, but a lot.
Yeah. Hello. Welcome to Post-Exertional Mayonnaise podcast, a podcast about living with ME, chronic illness, creativity, making meaning. And Dove and Lisa are with me, and we're all here. And we're not very well organised today because I spent ages faffing around trying to get my microphone to work and didn't do my usual little note taking. So do forgive us. Yeah, it's so good to be with us. We're going to have a chat about what it's like to live online as people with ME and what that means. And yeah,
Did
bring a thing.
Bring a thing?
Did
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you want to start with bring a thing?
who would like
This
to
is.
bring their thing?
I
So
want to bring
go on.
like 12 things. Can we bring 12 things?
I guess we'll have to have. Do we need a time limit on bring a thing? Because we could just be here forever, couldn't we? I guess. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I guess we should
A
do like
brief
a
a
minute,
brief thing.
a minute each. Bring a thing, a minute max.
Sure.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Yeah. So
Go
bring a thing.
ahead and start.
Huh?
So we just.
Go ahead and
Sorry.
start.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll start. I'll
Yeah.
start.
Okay.
Bring
Go
a thing. I was like, I thought of a million things. It's funny. Okay, so I'll just say that Dan and I had a really funny interaction online where I like sent him this video of Weird Al singing the song "Hot to Go." Do 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 do. Chapel Roan, who's like really big right now, and
Yeah.
Right.
I loved it. I also recently saw the Weird Al movie with Dan Radcliffe, and I grew up with Weird Al, but I didn't. There's a whole bunch of songs he's done that I didn't even know about because I sort of stopped listening to the radio in the late '80s or something, early '90s. But in any case, I loved this song, and I thought it was so sweet to see these dudes, him and Will Ford, doing like a hats off to Chapel Roan and singing the song, and really getting into it. And Dan did not like it, and I thought that was funny. And so Dan's like, "Why don't you share that today?" And that was the first thing. I was like, "I'm going to share that." And then there were a million others, and then I finally came to I want to share my thing that is because a lot of things do bring me joy. And I've also been watching Outlander. That was one of the things because it's just like immersive and beautiful cinematography. But what I want to talk about is 070 Shake's new album Petrichor, which is just fucking brilliant. 070 Shake is a queer artist who I'd say like I would say transmasc, but I don't know if that's a word she uses for herself, maybe butch. But a masked queer person who made this gorgeous I mean, sure, all of her stuff is pretty brilliant, but this new album, I highly recommend it. Maybe we'll post a link to it. And there's this one song called The Jersey Blues, it's like the way that it brings together so many different genres. It's so fun, but it's also kind of subversive in the way that it has sort of like um, I forget if it's like a 50s kind of pop bop whatever it is
Right.
it brings together all these genres in a way that's like kind of badass, and then it's also very like I think subversive in a queer way, but it's also absolutely completely fun, and yeah, it's just a brilliant album. And speaking of Seattle, guess who sings a song in it is the lead singer of Hole. I'm forgetting her name.
Courtney Love.
Courtney Love, and it's
Oh,
brilliant.
great.
Yeah, Courtney
Great.
Love does sings one of the songs, and it's brilliant. And yeah, so
Hey,
I that's my thing.
What's your thing, Lisa?
um, kind of more on a theme here. Mine, for anyone, The Normal Heart and The Destiny of Me by Larry Kramer, who wrote about both plays are about the early onset of the AIDS epidemic and when everyone was just dying en masse, and the government and the medical establishment watched for the first several years. But Larry Kramer was an artist and an activist, and he founded ACT UP, and he died in 2020, but just a huge inspiration. And I'd seen the movie The Normal Heart, but I never read the play. So when I ordered The Normal Heart, it came with The Destiny of Me. So I'm reading these right now, and just transformative. Highly, highly recommend. Infuriating in a good way, in that it motivates you. He was known for being angry in a really great way, but channeling the anger into action, hence ACT UP. So I would go with that. Beyonce tickets went on sale today, and for all of us who are too sick and or too broke to go, I'm going with Homecoming, which is still one of the best concert documentaries. It's still on Netflix, and that one just gets me all excited. I've been revisiting Paul McCartney's Ram, his first solo album. At the time, it was dismissed. Now it's lauded as a masterpiece. It's called the first indie rock album now, and he came out in 1971. And also Elliott Smith. I've been on a big Elliott Smith kick, which is, you can infer how things are going from that. And then the last one, John Coltrane's Blue Train. Sometimes when I'm really sick at night and I can't sleep, I've been playing it on a loop because it's just this gorgeous musical composition. It's about 10 minutes long, but it's kind of haunting and mournful as well. And when you're so, you guys know what it's like, those 3 a.m. nights where you're convinced you're going to die in the next 15 seconds and you kind of hope you would because you can't take it anymore. I find it really comforting. I'll just play it on a loop the whole night, and I find it really comforting.
I had that. I think I had that on LP actually. Friend lent it to me, so yeah. I don't know if I still got it, but yeah, I'll have to have a listen. Yeah. No, my thing is, last year, Rachel Riggs was on the podcast, and she's made a cookbook, and she lives with Emmy, and the first year, and if you go back and listen, watch the episode, it was really good. I got on a smoothie trip, and and I was having hemp smoothies on a regular basis for that period, just to and I ran out of the hemp, so I didn't buy any more, and that was the end of my smoothie. So yeah, I do apologise, Rachel, that I didn't keep it up. But it was good, and so Rachel's book is In Good Health, it's called, and I'm not sure if it might have changed names.
And it has a gorgeous cover. When you posted it on Insta, I saw it. It's a gorgeous cover.
Yeah, and you can now, it is beautiful.
Yeah, it's a great episode too. I highly, highly recommend that one.
Yeah, and the book's endorsed by Jason Mraz, and she talks about how she got to know him, which is fascinating. The Open Medicine Foundation also just emailed about it this week. So it's a cookbook.
Do you have it there to hold it up? You want to hold it up?
That's
nice.
Is it
Yay!
Beautiful.
That's it. It's now available for pre-order, and Rachel has pledged to donate the author proceeds from the first year sales of it to Emmy and on-COVID research through the OMF, which is brilliant.
Wow.
And that's a massive thing. Just a quick
Before
one for
we
Rachel.
go on,
Go on.
Oh yeah, what? Oh, were you still going?
It was just. She just said. I was just going to say how she talked about living. It's a hard process to publish a book with Emmy, and obviously the kind of the process that went behind it. So it's
I
not
actually
intended
have a
to
lot
be.
of questions about publishing with Emmy.
You could talk to her.
Just for another episode or another time, but would we be able to publish something with a bigger publishing house, given our all the ways that we wouldn't be able to go on tour or do anything? You know what I mean?
I have a lot of experience with that, so I will gladly address any.
Maybe let's let's talk about that in an episode. And I do want to do a shout out, because we were talking about this before we got on. Just Josh Johnson is a comedian who's on The Daily Show, and both Lisa and I have been watching him as a great way to get sort of be in the world, but in a way that's very calming and funny and interesting. And he's a beautiful storyteller. And yeah,
Dove recommended him last time, and I knew him from The Daily Show, and now I've been watching all of his stand-up, and I'm completely enthralled. Just brilliant.
I'll have to look
really
him up.
funny.
Yeah,
really.
So that was Bring a Thing. So we might bring a few things. And,
let's do. Okay, someday we're gonna do an episode that's just all Bring a Thing.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily Emmy related, but it can be anything, and definitely I'm gonna and
people this joy.
It brings us joy. Which, oops, sorry. I hope I didn't just. I have this little mic here. Anyways, people, if you want to post it, anybody who's listening, feel free to bring a thing in the comments.
And we can talk about that if it's
Yeah, we'd love that.
Yeah. So online, like how we were going to talk about what I don't know where did you come with the idea of, I don't know, we were talking about like living online. I think we touched on a little bit in the last episode, didn't we? And how we manage ourselves and our online lives and our personal ME lives. And yeah, it can get complicated, can't it? And you were saying
Yes.
sort of about like, you know, sort of like that tug, that sort of push and pull sort of thing about kind of thinking about being online and what it means and things. So
Yeah, I think like I think it's fascinating the way that so many people I know who have ME have met each other online. Like we've all met each other online.
Right.
We're a very close knit community, but there's also an element of a lot of our relationships that might be considered parasocial. And I'm really interested in sort of the fluid boundary between sort of social and parasocial. And, you know, like I think being online means something different to all of us, and it depends on the medium or whatever. Like I think when I first got on Twitter, I built this beautiful, wonderful, large community, and then I got overwhelmed and kind of ran away. And I was like, I can't deal with Twitter anymore. And since then, I've not been online much. But during the time when I was online, I met Dan, which has been one of the wonderful things in my, you know, it's. I guess I'm trying to think like you and my friend Kathy, I met on Goodreads. Like I've met some really close friends online, but I've also had a lot of complicated interactions where it's, you know, getting to know people online or not getting to know people on, you know, there's so much. And Litsa I think Litsa wanted to sort of talk about what it's like dealing with the negative impact of people behaving bad, you know, like trolls and harassment online, and just how fucking shitty people can be online. And that's part of it too. And Dan, what were you mainly wanting to focus on? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, it's just how we kind of like shape ourselves or not, or how much,
right, like persona.
Like how much does our sort of like online life kind of mirror, or do we have to kind of keep part of ourselves back? Or I think personally, I was a lot more open than I am now. I think in the past about I you know, Facebook posts when I first became an awful lot about how I was feeling, or and you know, I'd put tweets out. I don't even. I mean, I'm still technically on Twitter, but I don't kind of tweet really anymore. But I don't put much on Blue Sky either. So yeah, it's I don't know if that's more just because I don't know. I've kind of got to the point that I don't know what to say anymore. I just like it sort of just feels a bit sort of like but how do we shape kind of like who we are online as opposed to in real life?
I think one thing all three of us have in common is we would love to interact in person much more than we get to. And I think that's true of the entire ME community. Before we started taping, I was telling Daniel, one of my best friends is encouraging me just to get rid of all social media. And I have two rebuttals. A, I'm an author, so I can't. I'm contractually obligated in any whatever. Pretty much every publication makes sure that you have a social media presence. I don't get a say in that. Secondly, for the second book, I'll need social media. So that's that whole argument is just nullified right there. But also, one of the things that's happened since we taped last time, this conversation just happened to come up a few different times with different loved ones, explaining again. I don't want to have to interact online as much as I do. I can go weeks without seeing people. Last spring, because I had an emergency room visit, and then 36 hours, I had a pre-surgical appointment that I could not bump back. The combination of doing all of that in 36 hours, I lost like a good chunk of last spring. So what are you going to do? Just not interact with other humans at all? No, of course you're going to interact online. Twitter, I've found to be a total cesspool at this point. I locked my Twitter account months ago. and I've kept it up just in case. Basically, the reason I kept it up, the short version, you guys know this, I came forward in a Me Too story years ago that became very big, and a lot of it unfolded on Twitter. So I never want, for legal reasons, I need to keep it, but I don't use it anymore. Blue Sky right now, and I said this last time, for anyone who's got ME or any illness, so far Blue Sky is like what Twitter used to be in the early years. It's smart people who want to engage with other smart people and exchange ideas, and very little trolling, particularly in compared to where Twitter is now, or Insta or Facebook. So right now we kind of have the halcyon days of Blue Sky, and I find that really rewarding. And like Dove had talked about earlier, there's photography, there's music, there's art, a lot of ornithologists. There's some really incredible bird photos on there. But the ME community is growing on Blue Sky, and I like. Okay, here's an example. One of my cousins is disabled, and we got to see each other a week and a half ago. And we don't have much in common except for the fact we're both disabled. And I swear to God, this half-hour conversation with my disabled cousin, he understood more than I've been explaining to. I'm not saying this as a criticism because some of my friends are listening to this. They love me and they support me, but there's a barrier to what they can understand. And some of that is just being a human. I mean, we're all limited in how much we can understand each other's lives. And it's always it tugs at you. It's kind of tragic. We all want to understand more than we do sometimes. But here I sat down for half an hour. It was at my mom's birthday party. And my disabled cousin, he sat down next to me. He wanted to vent. He's had a lot of stuff going on. He needed to vent. And he said he felt so much better. And I felt so much better. And I didn't need to explain something that I find really gratifying about online interaction. Everyone with ME has faced a deluge of medical abuse. And we're seeing that with long COVID now. And we see it with a lot of illnesses. It's not just quote unquote ME and long COVID. But I have able-bodied friends who get a cold every 2 years, that kind of thing. And God bless, I'm glad. They're astonished. Your doctor did that? Yeah. That's not the only. I can take up the rest of the month sharing medical abuse stories. And it's exhausting. There's still this preconceived notion that, oh, doctors are the good guys. Some of them are. Some of them are. But as a profession, I mean, we have a huge mortality rate in the United States. Black women die during childbirth for no other reason than institutionalized racism. They're not doing anything differently. They're not doing anything wrong. And their mortality rate is astronomical compared to white women. It's shocking. Not just us. And I don't want to make Black women who have ME have to choose between which demographic they fall into. Are you Black? Do you have ME? It's all of the above. But we know the medical profession is not what people think it is. It's not every goddamn television show that is a medical drama. It's like, oh, Grey's Anatomy, ER. I start to feel like it's almost propaganda. That it's not propaganda, to be clear, but almost. Like, that's not the experience you will have if you were an ill person. They're not going to do everything they can to cure you, and they're going to want you out of their office in 15 minutes.
Do you remember when doctors are dickheads went around Twitter as a tag, and people would...
That was validating. There were some great stories. Tragic stories, but really, I think we all felt less alone.
Yeah, and people were posting sort of the most outrageous things that either doctors or friends or anybody had sort of recommended or said to that. There's...
Us were shocked. None of us were like, no, slow down. That didn't happen. And I find that from, just like I said, just by chance, since we taped last time, I've had 3 different interactions with loved ones, able-bodied loved ones, where it's like, oh God, I can't keep explaining this stuff. It has been a really wearing 2 weeks where it's like, well, I don't know how else to explain it. I think a lot of it, as we've all talked about before, it's based in fear, because if it can happen to me, it can happen to them. And it's like, I don't make the rules. But then you talk to other people online who have ME, and there's a shorthand.
Yeah.
And you don't have to explain every particle of your existence. How about you, Dan? Oh,
Oh,
go
yeah.
ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, one of the beautiful things about having an online Emmy community, I love that word shorthand. Is like, yeah, having a shorthand, having shared experiences, um, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about connecting with Emmy community online, and yeah, and also I think it can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming to sort of sit with the reality of all of our shared experiences and
Yeah.
Mm,
yeah.
and maybe like for me, I think online I've probably like been less um sort of less kind of posting regularly and things like that. But I hope, and it's hard because you can't kind of you want to maintain your online friendships as much as possible, don't you, as well? And sometimes it's just like you struggle to get back to a certain person or something like that. But I think I try to maintain like regular close contact with friends that I
Right.
have made, but like outside of social media sort of thing. So it's it is more like emailing Dove or whatever, or it's like I've got two or three friends that I just message regularly and things like that. So I think it's like for me maybe like investing more in those friendships rather than like a massive group of people sort of thing. um, yeah,
So you
yeah.
managed to stay an introvert while also being on a social media site with billions of other people.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, I think sometimes your own sort of like capacity to engage, and I wonder if it's like, because sometimes I'd think, oh, I haven't really tweeted anything for a while, and then I'd notice that like, oh, I've like tweeted like loads within 2 or 3 days or whatever, or quite a few tweets or whatever. This is before kind of Twitter went down the pan, um, but but yeah, it's interesting because like I think it can also then be a reflection of like how you're feeling as a person and your overall kind of like baseline almost, because like it's almost like coming out of a shell, isn't it? When you've been through like a post-exertional malaise or whatever, or a crash, or your baseline's dropped, and then maybe you start and improve. Sometimes like you realize afterwards, oh, like I started tweeting again and I hadn't realized that I'd not been, sort of thing. It's interesting, isn't it? Just the way that you can sometimes like almost like your social media use can be a sort of barometer of your sort of physical health and your mental health as well, because
Yeah.
like the two things kind of fluctuate, don't they, and
And
based
and
on each other.
sometimes you absolutely have to log off. I think all of us
Yeah.
agree on that. Sometimes you just, whether it's because we have ME and we're really ill, like you said, it can be a barometer of how you can gauge your own health when you scroll through your account. But just sometimes as a person, just as a human person, sometimes you just need to get away from it. It's finding that balance. And we've all talked about that. It's finding that balance.
Um,
Yeah,
um,
I mean, I think it's also interesting the question of sort of what kind of social interactions and engagements feel good to us in a certain moment. Like, I think when I was on Twitter, I was really enjoying sort of having meaningful things to say that I wanted to say in a way that might be heard by a larger group of people. But I like I'm speaking of being introverted. Like I am an introvert, and I think I could get very easily socially overwhelmed. And so I think right now I'm not meeting anybody new on social media right now. Like I'm just basically reposting, gnarly like reposting like we're on the Titanic, whatever, and I'm just like posting the news on the Titanic as it sinks, sort of thing. But I don't think that I think when I early on with ME, I was devastatingly isolated. I was very lonely, and I like at that it took a while for my friends to sort of be friends to me with as a person with ME. Like I do have friends that I stayed friends with, but it took them a significant amount of time to return to the friendship once I got ME, and it kind of freaked people out or whatever. And so early on with ME, I met like I was developing friendships with people through social media, and that was wonderful. And at this point in time, I wonder what's happened with Dan.
oh, there we go. Okay, so we just had a bit of a blip. So, So yeah,
Technical difficulties, but we're back.
does anybody know where we were? What
I
we
think I
were
was
talking?
talking about. Was I talking about sort of, I guess, like how at different points in time we want different things from being on social media, blah blah blah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and again, finding a balance and how sometimes we do log off, regardless of our health. Sometimes you just need to get away from it all.
Mm,
And in particularly in this era that we're in right now, sometimes it's overwhelming. But there is this sense of community that we get.
Right.
One of the things that I think that's hard for other people to understand, it is so hard for people with ME to get from point A to point B. And when you were talking about isolation, that's where we were. When you were talking about isolation, Dove.
Oh yeah, early on early on, I've had ME for 11 years about now, and early on when I first got the flu and then sort of descended into ME for lack of better words, I didn't know what was happening to me. My friends didn't really understand what was happening to me, and there was a period of time where I was like devastatingly just isolated and lonely. And at that point, I first got on Goodreads and sort of made a community there. And then I got on Twitter, and that was like an incredibly meaningful way to actually like meet community and wonderful. Like I met my friend Kathy on Goodreads, who I still speak to very often, and I met Dan on Twitter, and so I made a few friends, and that was wonderful. And then I think there came a point where I just became sort of in every way overwhelmed by social media, like socially overwhelmed, informationally overwhelmed, and I kind of pulled back. And at that point, I think I felt like I very satisfied sort of with my community and social life, and like I didn't really have spoons to kind of have the kind of interactions with in the context of like having a big online community. So I think, but I also like I loved all of my I loved my community on there, and I miss my community on there, and I also just didn't have the capacity to stay connected in the ways that I was trying to do.
Well, and one of the things we might want to praise our community for, one of the great dangers of the internet, of course, is misinformation and disinformation. And we see that's just rampant on social media. For the most part, people in the ME community don't do that. We are desperate for peer-reviewed research, and we share peer-reviewed research. And that's how I discovered Dr. Maureen Hansen at Cornell was on Twitter. Someone else was retweeting one of her newest papers. She runs the Hansen lab at Cornell. She's not a physician. She's a molecular biologist and geneticist. And she's at the forefront of ME research. That's how I came across Dan Petrino at the Petrino lab at Mount Sinai, who he spearheads the Mount Sinai ME research team. I have found that in the ME community, for the most part, I don't see. I mean, there's always a couple wackos. That's going to be true for every community, but I don't see a lot of crazy shit coming from people in the ME community. For the most part, we are desperate to find answers. And yeah, there are a few loose screws, but that's going to be true. Just again, that's part of being a human.
Right. I think there's like the things that are complex, I think, in the ME community is one, there are some conflicts, for example, around the question of like, do we call it CFS ME? Do we call it ME? Do we separate out CFS and then, those things I think got conflictual in the community. And then the other thing is that whole issue with people saying that they've been cured and then claiming that they can cure everybody. And that, I think those, from my memory, those have been the two most sort of charged or difficult things.
I will avoid those discussions because I am on U34 of ME and I want to be wrong, but I'm 34 years into this, 33 and a half. Here's what happens when people are cured. They're in remission. And I've seen it, and I want them to be cured. They're not. They're in remission. And I know this because I used to lead the Seattle support group for 2 years. And that was before, going to your point about isolation, when I got sick in 91, the isolation, I'm only at the point now that I can talk about it, that it was so destructive. And one of my very best friends, he was over here recently, and I said it with love, and he heard it with love. He understood what I was saying, that we were all in our 20s, and they got to, and we stayed friends, but they got to go on with their lives in a way that I didn't. And the first 3 years I was sick, I was just annihilated physically. And then later I had remissive periods where I got to catch up socially and with my career and make myself a writer. But it's hard to describe to people who haven't lived it. You guys got to go on without me. And if I'd had the internet when I was in my 20s, it would have been a godsend, because there were nights the time didn't pass, and I would read and I would watch movies, but it was complete 100% isolation, and it did a lot of damage. So that's why I would never advocate for anyone to log off entirely unless they feel that's the best thing for their mental health. But in the ME community, that whole discussion, is anyone cured? No, I wish they were. I wish any of us woke up cured tomorrow. I've just seen it too many goddamn times. It's a remission.
Yeah.
And almost certain.
Right.
You know,
and even if somebody,
go on. No, go on.
Oh, even if somebody does feel better, like, first of all, that doesn't mean that you know what you did. Like, people make assumptions about what caused them to get
Right.
better and then try to push it on other people, and that's never okay. And also, there is chance that some of the people who sort of recovered don't necessarily have ME, or it's like there are so many
diagnostic tests. We don't
Right.
know if that person had ME in the start. Thank you for saying that. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess, like, I agree with you that there's a lot of wonderful, really important, essential information. Like, most of the information that I have about ME, I get from other people with ME. We have a wonderful kind of, like, we're all desperate for help and there's not much of it. So when there's a new medication that is helping some people, it's like, it gets around the community.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of support. There's also, like, there was recently someone locally reached out to me because she had a friend who needed help getting nutrition medically, and was like, I was trying to support her family to help her get a J-tube, I believe it was. And like, I reached out to a bunch of people in the ME community and had, like, she just had an incredible amount of support.
Right.
I think there are so many ways that we support each other, and that doesn't make it perfect. It's never going to be perfect.
Never, again, because we're human. Where I was really grateful for the people who answered months ago when I was trying oxaloacetate. I was treating for a time with Dr. Kaufman, and we tried a number of different treatments, none of which worked and all of which would made me worse. This was in the fall. And so I stopped treating with him at about the 3-month mark because I was $6,000 out of pocket and I don't have it. It was just bleeding me dry. But again, he's at the forefront of ME treatment. If it had worked, it would have been worth it. But it didn't. But the oxaloacetate it's considered a medical food. And if it works, for the people for whom it works, it helps with the post-exertional malaise. They're not crashing as hard and they have more sustained physical energy. The flip side, for all of us for whom it doesn't work, the nausea, it was like the cancer nausea with radiation. And I felt like, okay, if we can't get the nausea under control, just fucking kill me. I can't take this. And he was kind of peeved with me that I didn't stay on it longer. And I told him, is this about treating me or about what I can withstand? Because this is burning a hole in my stomach. My kidneys started hurting.
Oh.
For anyone who's thinking about taking oxaloacetate, here's what I learned from my own research. A known side effect is kidney stones. I developed really awful kidney pain in a week, and that kidney pain stayed with me throughout all of December. And I was really scared, like, oh God, do we have one more thing going wrong? It went away. It dissipated on its own, but because it can help people. And this, we all know this is the flip side with any medical treatment or medical food. It's powerful. If it can help you, it's powerful, which means if it does not work in your body, it can do a lot of damage. But it was so invaluable that I could use the hashtags, person with ME and myalgic encephalomyelitis. And have you guys tried oxaloacetate? What's your experience with it? And I was getting responses in the States, in Britain, in Australia, and and a wide variety of experiences. Some people had the same problem I did, just crazy nausea. And for others, it was incredibly helpful. But I was moved by how many people answered the question and were retweeting it. Or on whatever we're calling it on Blue Sky, reposting it. But I was really moved by the depth of concern. And we all do that for each other.
Yeah, when I was trying to get help for that, the friend of a friend,
Right.
people from all over the world I was in contact with, and all over the states, and it's a really, I think it's a really special thing that like we have access to that kind of.
I'm grateful for it. I'm
Yeah.
really grateful for it.
Where do you guys sort of land in terms of like thinking about online friendships and how significant they are? And because a lot of people will sort of argue that you maybe can't have an online friendship that's as significant as in real life and things like that. It's such a kind of like a, I think unless you have those online friendships, you can't.
Well, I think that's
yeah.
absurd. Like, it makes me think. Of course, I'm a Jane Austen. What do you call that? Like, I'm a Janeite or whatever you want to call it. I don't really. That's not how I think of myself, but I love that word. Anyways, I'm obsessed with Jane Austen, and like, you know, a lot of her relationships were through writing letters because that was a very normal way to like build
Right.
relationships. I think we've always, since there has been, and what else I made me think of is like I've done a lot of research about sort of early writing in the ancient Near East, and there's wonderful letters from like, I don't know, 2000 BCE, from like these families were split up because some of them had to go quite a I don't know, hundreds of miles, thousands of miles away for the sake of business. And so they're, writing back and forth. And I guess what I'm saying is that I don't think there's any particular way that like any particular form of meeting and communication that makes friendship more viable. I think what makes friendship viable is sort of the depth and the meaningfulness of a interpersonal connection. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, my best friend lives in New Hampshire, which is on the East Coast of the United States. I'm in Seattle on the West Coast. We talk on the phone all the time. We text. I'm very good friends with her husband. The three of us have a Slack channel going. We can't, she's also high risk. We can't fly back and forth. So we haven't been in the same room in years, and I don't love her any less, and she doesn't love me any less. Ideally, and she and I have talked about this, we would love to be in the same room. It's not a physical reality. One of my very good friends with Emmy here in Seattle, we met on Twitter, and then we took the we still interact on Blue Sky, but we took the conversation off Twitter and we text all the time.
Yeah.
And that has been invaluable. And yeah, my closest friendships that I've made online, one of my very good friends, like my best friends in the whole world, we met online years ago and we're friends in real life now. Nothing can substitute in-person interaction. No one is making that argument. Of course not. We would all prefer to interact in real life. But when you can't, there are people I've known online. One of my longtime buddies, who I've known online for 15 years now, we've never been in the same room. And I respect this person tremendously. Really smart. He's a teacher. Those connections, I treasure them. I treasure them. And no, I don't know absolutely everything about my online friends, but I don't know absolutely everything about my in real life friends either.
I have a question to ask you guys. Particularly Dan, if you want to answer, but fine if not. But like, what do you guys think is different about, like, what do you sort of, for lack of better words, sorry, I'm not having a good time with words, but what do you get in an in-person interaction that you can't sort of have in an online, or through writing and video chatting and phone talking? Like, what makes it? What do you think makes, or do you think it does? Like, because I guess for me, I don't see it. a to me, a friend is a friend is a friend. Like, well, what do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I don't like. I've got online friends and I've got real life friends. I don't see them any differently. I would just love to meet my online friends.
Yeah.
um, uh, uh,
Yes.
I think there is something that unless you're having like regular, kind of online Zoom chats or whatever, I think for you and me, Dove, our relationship kind of just went in a different direction once we started like having regular Zoom chats. We're just like, oh, should we kind of chat every so often? And then you do learn about each other. It adds depth to a relationship, doesn't it? In the sense that suddenly you learn more about the other person, or a conversation can go in a completely different direction when you're having a face to face, like we do on the podcast, which is very different from like maybe like emailing. And not to say the emails can't go in lots of different directions because they do, but yeah, I think there is that element of face to face is great, but I don't see the value in those relationships as being any different from the value that there is in the online ones. Yeah.
A lot of my closest friends don't live in Seattle anymore, and we email all the time or text or FaceTime. What I love about in person is, going to your question, what do you miss when you're not in person? You get in real time facial expressions, which we have here too. And
Right.
the more our online experience can mimic in real life, I think the better it is for everyone. I like the spontaneity of it. There's something about sitting down and eating a meal with someone or just having coffee. Since COVID, I have to be I'm pro-vaccine. I can't tolerate vaccines anymore, so I have to mask everywhere. And my friends and my family have been great about coming over. There's a conference room in my apartment building, and I book it, and we have food there, and we can socially distance. It's big enough. I can sit over here and we can eat. And there's something kind of communal about that. And then I remask again, and then I lie down on the couch. And, just to hug someone. The first few years of COVID, I couldn't hug anyone. And one of my best doctors was concerned. He said, "You're doing the right thing physically, but I'm really worried about what this is doing psychologically. You're not supposed to be this shut off from the world." And I said, "Yeah." And he agreed. He said, "If you get COVID, it's almost certain you're going to be hospitalized or you will die." So he didn't even want me going to the grocery store, even with a mask. And, in time, I now just go places with a mask, but it means you can't go to restaurants, you can't go to coffee houses. So I'm very grateful my friends come to me and my family will come to me. And that's just a godsend, because sometimes you just want to hug someone. And now if I keep my mask on, or if the person takes protocol seriously, yeah, you can hug people. And I miss that. And that's one of the reasons the dog has been a godsend. My dog, Jordan, we watch movies together at night. We read together.
Yeah.
It matters. It matters.
I have more questions. So I do want to say that we're all really wiped out, so we may have to
yeah, I was going to say
cut this into yeah. So I'll ask the question, but maybe we can wait. We can see if you want to talk, or maybe just we'll do a second and or I think this will be an ongoing conversation because there's so much to talk about, and hopefully people watching or listening will have questions for us or thoughts, and we'll. But I am curious. One thing I'm curious about is sort of, I think for me, one of the things I miss, like I haven't been out to a cafe or out to eat or even in a grocery store. I mean, I've been to a grocery store maybe like 8 years ago. I haven't been to a cafe or a restaurant probably for 11 years. And like, I guess I miss meeting people. I miss the process of meeting people in person where you get to have sort of more casual interactions at first, like bowling, going out to coffee, going to a Shabbat dinner, going for a walk or a bike ride, like getting to meet people in a way where you get to know them more gradually in the context of like seeing how they are in the world. Like,
yes.
And so that came to mind when you were talking. And, so, like how do you get to know people online when you don't get to have that kind of, getting to know what a person's like, seeing them interact with other people, seeing them, kind of, it's one of the ways you get to know people is to see how they treat like the people around them. And and also just like get to know their quirks and all that. And so, I hadn't met,
the subtleties.
so we don't get that online. So how do we deal with like what it's like to get to know someone and meet people? And also, how do people deal with sort of the loss of that sort of mundane getting to just sort of be in the world with people? Yeah.
I miss having like work colleagues, because that's a different thing altogether, isn't it? And it's a bit like that. So it's like I think I sometimes see online. I know it sounds strange, but online friends like my work friends that I would sort of spend time with, like, and that sometimes with work friends you might go for a pint after work, other times you don't, but you get on well while you're working. So it's like I sort of, that's kind of how I see a lot of my friends, and that's not a bad reflection. It's just it's just kind of like a way of replacing, I suppose, those everyday contacts that you have with people that you lose by being isolated, I guess. Yeah.
As a writer, I always am alone. I mean, professionally, you're alone when you're writing, unless you're in a newsroom or on that end of the spectrum. So for me, that hasn't been that much of a change. But one of the things that all my writer friends and I would do is, because you are alone for hours while you're writing, or, your spouse or your partner's in the other room while you're concentrating, we would make a point of getting together for that reason, because as a profession, it's so profoundly isolating. And that changed with COVID too. And now some of us are trying to regain, and these were people who were healthy, but just it shattered our whole paradigm that had existed since the last pandemic, a century prior. And we're trying to make more of an effort to see each other in person. And they've been very good at understanding my own physical limitations. But going to Dove's point, it is a loss when you don't get to meet someone subtly. One of the things we taught, and I know we need to get going, but just for women who are listening, interacting online is its own minefield. And just the simplest things, I hit like, when we were talking about photography, there's some great photographers on Blue Sky. I hit like on this guy's photo, and it was around midnight, and he'd taken this beautiful photo. I don't want to give away who it is because I don't want him to creep out again. And he DM'd me immediately with this really inappropriate DM. And I'm just like, motherfucker, damn it.
You can't just like
every woman on earth has a million versions of that. So that's the other downside of the internet. In person, you can hone in on creepy guys. You can discern who's creepy and who's not a lot more readily, because you have to. If you're a human woman on this earth, you learn by around the age of 14 to keep your radar up. And it was the most benign nature photo I'm hitting like on, and I get this creepy fucking DM. It's like, no, and I just blocked him immediately.
Yeah.
Hateful shit on him. That, and you can't.
Sucks.
In person, it's much easier to pick. And sometimes, the sociopaths will get by all of us. You find out way down the road that, oh my God, this person's dangerous. But a lot of the time in person, you get that vibe. We are mammals. We have instinct. You get that vibe. This is a creepy person. I need to get away. And that doesn't always happen with online interaction.
Unless you're half of America or the U.S. Unless you're half of the U.S. Sorry.
Daniel, my friend, are you about to pass out?
I'm wilting. Yeah, I'm definitely wilting. So
let's talk about this more another time.
It's been good.
Yeah, we have lots to talk about.
It's been good, but we'll all go away and rest now, and yeah, we'll see you next time. But yeah, send your bringer things in, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.